You know, sometimes I sit here in my quiet little house, watching the rain fall, and I still can't quite believe it. I almost died, and when I looked up from the hospital bed, the people I spent my entire life caring for, my own blood, my children, weren't there. They weren't fighting traffic, they weren't rushing to my side. They were at a balloon-filled, pastel-themed, utterly frivolous birthday party for my daughter-in-law. Let me say that again. My children chose a party over what they thought, for a terrifying hour, was my literal deathbed. I'm an 82-year-old widow, and I had a major cardiac event that morning, the kind the doctors call a widow-maker. Funny how life throws that terminology at you. And when my son, Robert, finally walked in, reeking faintly of cheap champagne and fake regret, his first question wasn't, "Are you okay, Mom?" It was, "Did we miss the worst of it? Samantha would have killed me if I skipped her 40th. Was I wrong for what I did next? For the decision I made right there, as the monitors were still beeping beside me, and the fear of mortality was still cold in my chest. Tell me honestly, would you have done the same thing, or would you have just forgiven them and forgotten? Because I didn't. I packed up my life and walked away, and I haven't looked back. My story isn't about a sudden, dramatic falling out. It's about a slow, chilling fade to black, a subtle shift in the gravitational pull of my family that I should have seen coming but chose to ignore. It all started so simply, the way good lives do. My husband, Thomas, and I had 3 wonderful children. Robert, the eldest, a successful but chronically self-absorbed lawyer. Sarah, the middle child, a sweet-natured teacher who was often too quick to concede to everyone else's demands. And Michael, the youngest, a musician who lived a bit further away, but was always the most dependable for a thoughtful call or card. We built our home, a lovely two-story colonial, with our hands and our savings, and we filled it with laughter, scraped knees, and the smell of Thomas's famous apple pie. When Thomas passed away 10 years ago, a piece of the foundation went with him, but I told myself I still had my children. They promised they'd always look out for me, Robert and his wife, Samantha. Oh, Samantha lived closest, just a 10-minute drive away. Sarah was 30 minutes away, and Michael, as I said, lived in another state, about a 5-hour drive. The problem, the subtle rot in the wood, was Samantha. Samantha is, to put it mildly, a social tyrant. Her life revolves around appearances, social standing, and parties, always parties. She's a brilliant event planner, which means her own life is one continuous, meticulously styled event. Over the years, her parties and her schedule slowly became the primary religion in Robert's life. Family holidays became scheduling conflicts. My birthdays were often moved to a different weekend because they clashed with one of Samantha's charity galas or an exclusive brunch. The first time Robert told me he couldn't come to Thanksgiving because they were hosting a curated, intimate gathering for people who actually matter in the city, I cried in the pantry. Sarah was always a bit better, but she has 2 young children, and honestly, Samantha managed to intimidate her too, always implying that Sarah's life was too messy, too domestic, too boring. Michael, bless his heart, would call and listen to my woes, but what could he do from 5 states away? The slow creep of neglect felt like a chill I couldn't shake. I started waiting for their calls, not interrupting their day, always being flexible so as not to cause a fuss, and in doing so, I made myself small and invisible. I became the parent who wouldn't be a burden, and they, in turn, stopped treating me like a priority. It all culminated on the day of Samantha's 40th birthday. It was, of course, a massive, elaborate affair. A whole weekend, actually. Robert had been stressing about it for weeks, making sure every detail was perfect for his queen. The main event was a catered Saturday night dinner, but the prelude was a lavish, all-day Saturday brunch/lawn party. I woke up that morning feeling a tightness in my chest that wasn't just the usual morning stiffness. It was a pressure, a squeezing, and a cold sweat. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just indigestion from the terrible takeout I'd had the night before. I was alone, and I thought I could sleep it off, but the pain intensified, radiating down my left arm, textbook horror, and suddenly I was on the floor, fumbling for my phone. I didn't call 911 immediately. I called Robert. I know, stupid, but you call your child. I could barely speak. I gasped out, Robert, I think I'm having a heart attack. Please, can you come? The silence on the other end was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Then I heard a clinking of glasses and a smooth, almost rehearsed voice. Mom, I'm literally standing by the ice sculpture. Samantha is about to cut the cake. It's impossible for me to leave right now. We have 200 guests. I heard Samantha whisper harshly in the background. Tell her to call the ambulance, Robert. Don't be ridiculous. Robert then said, just call 911, Mom. I'll come over as soon as I can, I promise. Sarah is here too, I'll tell her, just hang tight. He hung up. He didn't even wait for a confirmation. I managed to call 911, and the EMT got to me quickly. As they were wheeling me out, I saw Sarah's car drive past, filled with balloons and a look of terrified distraction on her face. She saw the ambulance, she saw me, and she didn't stop. She drove right past me and into Samantha's party driveway. It turns out Robert had told her I felt a little queasy, but insisted she couldn't miss her sister. In-law's big moment. He downplayed my dying to protect a party. I was rushed to the hospital, where they performed an emergency procedure. It was serious. The nurses, strangers to me, were kinder than my children. They held my hand, they comforted me, and they saved my life. By late afternoon, I was stabilized and in recovery, utterly exhausted and alone. I had managed to text Michael, who immediately jumped in his car and drove 5 hours straight, arriving around midnight, his face gray with fear and exhaustion. But Robert and Sarah, they arrived around 7 p.m., hours after the crisis had passed, and only after the main event of Samantha's party was over. Robert came in first, all frantic performance, but the smell of champagne and the forced cheer in his eyes gave him away. Sarah looked genuinely upset, but also guilty, as if she was upset about my heart attack, but more upset that she had been forced to think about it at a party. The sheer, cold reality of their actions hit me harder than the heart attack itself. They chose the optics, the obligation, the minor, temporary displeasure of a social event's host over the very real possibility of losing their mother forever. The party was more important. I was a footnote to Samantha's fabulous 40th. So that's the situation I was in, hooked up to tubes, staring at the ceiling, having survived the unsurvivable, only to be confronted with the devastating realization that my own children had already started writing my obituary in their minds, and they weren't even going to let it interrupt their weekend plans. I lay there for a long time, the silence of the hospital room broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the machines, and I realized I am alone, utterly and completely alone. The person I had spent my life sacrificing for, who I had put before every job, every vacation, every personal desire, had put me last. I was just a house key they held, a signature on a living will, a chore to be scheduled. Before I tell you what I did next, the thing that caused utter chaos in their lives, the thing that I am still grappling with the rightness or wrongness of, I want you to pause right now and calm, and below what you would have done in my shoes, Would you have let it go? Would you have accepted their half-hearted apology and let the cycle of neglect start over? What is a mother supposed to do when her children effectively confirm she is dead to them? I made my decision that night, right before Michael finally arrived, red-eyed and shaking. When Robert and Sarah came in, full of their hollow apologies, the traffic was terrible. Samantha really needed me there. We thought you were stable by then. I just looked them in the eye and said 2 words, "Get out." They were shocked. They started to protest, but my voice, though weak, was steel. I said, "Get out. You've had your fun. Go home." They sputtered, confused by the sudden, unfamiliar resistance, and then they left. The next morning, Michael arrived. He was devastated, not just by my health scare, but by his siblings' actions, which I described to him in full. He hugged me, he cried, and he told me he was so sorry for not being closer, not being there. I told him it wasn't his fault, that he was the only one who showed up. The only one. It took me a week to recover enough to be discharged. During that week, Robert and Sarah visited only once each, short, uncomfortable visits where I kept my answers clipped and my eyes distant. I didn't want to see them. I was already making my plans. My house, the two-story colonial, was the financial anchor of my life. Thomas and I had paid it off years ago, and it was worth a considerable amount. Robert and Sarah had always, quite openly, planned on inheriting it, talking about splitting the estate. Like it was an inevitability, a future retirement fund, even while I was still here, making their dinner and doing their laundry when they were kids. The week after I got home, with Michael's silent, supportive help, I put my plan into action. I called a real estate agent I trusted, one of Thomas's old friends. I listed the house immediately and quietly. I told Robert and Sarah I was tired, needed privacy, and would only talk to them on the phone. They didn't push. They were too busy getting back to their lives. The house sold in less than a month for a significant sum. I then used a portion of that money to purchase a small, beautiful maintenance-free condo in a quiet, sunny town 3 states away, near where Michael lived. I arranged for a moving company to pack up the essentials while I was out getting a checkup. The rest, all the furniture, the china, the things they fought over and coveted, I told the movers to take to a charity donation center. I didn't even look at it. It was just stuff, and it was tied to a life I was done with. I closed on the condo and the house on the same day. I was already sitting in my new, sun-drenched living room when I sent the email. It was simple, titled A Farewell. I explained what had happened, not the medical details, but the emotional ones. I wrote that when faced with my mortality, my children chose a party, and in doing so, they showed me exactly where I stood in their lives, outside. I told them I had sold the house, that I was moving, and that I was done waiting for them to prioritize me. The most devastating part for them, I knew, would be the financial news. I told them I had set up a trust for Michael. Not the whole sum, but enough to secure his future. For Robert and Sarah, I had a lawyer send a formal letter stating that they were receiving a one-time gift of $20,000 each, a generous sum, but nowhere near the millions they were expecting from the estate. The rest of the money, I wrote, was for my life now, for traveling, for being comfortable, and for the peace of mind that comes from knowing I am only taking care of the one person who truly cared for me, myself, and for Michael, who proved himself a son. I explicitly stated that I was not disowning them, but I was prioritizing them. I told them I loved the children they were, but I could not continue to be the mother to the adults they had become. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Robert called me, screaming, accusing me of being mentally incompetent, threatening lawsuits over the sale of the house, demanding to know where the money was. Sarah was more tearful, pleading, asking how I could do this to their children, that it was their legacy, their children's college fund. Samantha, predictably, was the loudest, leaving a series of unhinged voicemails, calling me selfish, manipulative, and a poor excuse for a mother. I didn't answer a single call. I didn't respond to a single email. I let my lawyers handle the threats, which, of course, amounted to nothing. They couldn't sue me for selling my house and spending my money. I was the widow, not the child. I had secured my financial future, and the only leverage they had over me, my presence, my life, my love, was gone. The house, their financial inheritance, the tangible proof of their expectation, was gone. Now, 6 months later, I am happier than I have been in years. Michael visits often, and we take trips together. He doesn't ask for a dime, he just enjoys my company, which confirms my decision to help him. Robert and Sarah still try to reach out, mostly with clipped, desperate texts asking if I've changed my mind, if I'm willing to discuss the will. I respond politely to their holiday cards with a simple, signed message, maintaining the distance. They realize too late that I wasn't just a placeholder for a house. I was their mother, a human being with a heart that failed, and a heart that finally hardened. My life is quiet now, filled with sun, books, and the company of a son who proved he valued me over a party. I mourned the loss of the family I thought I had, but I celebrated the freedom of the one I chose. I am free. Was it a harsh lesson? Absolutely. But I didn't choose to teach them that lesson. They wrote the syllabus themselves the day they drove past the ambulance. I took my life back, the life they so cavalierly dismissed, and I built something new with it. I now know that self-preservation is not selfish, it is necessary. I left them behind, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to survive. I had to choose my own life, and the only way to do that was to stop being their doormat. Like this video if you were on my side, if you think I made the right choice to reclaim my life. Subscribe for more stories like this, where I share the difficult truths of family and what happens when the people you love stop loving you back. And please, share your final, honest thoughts on this whole, messy situation in the comments section below. I want to know if you think I was right, or if I should have just been the silent, forgiving mother they expected. I'll see you all in the next story.